Animal coloration is the general appearance of an animal resulting from the reflection or emission of light from its surfaces. Some animals are brightly colored, while others are hard to see. In some species, such as the peacock, the male has strong patterns, conspicuous colors and is iridescent, while the female is far less visible. There are several separate reasons why animals have evolved colors. Camouflage enables an animal to remain hidden from view. Signaling enables an animal to communicate information such as warning of its ability to defend itself. Animals also use color in advertising. Signaling services such as cleaning to animals of other species, to signal sexual status to other members of the same species, and in mimicry, taking advantage of another species' warning coloration. Some animals use color to divert attacks by startle, surprising a predator, e.g., with eye spots or other flashes of color, and possibly by motion dazzle, confusing a predator's attack by moving a bold pattern rapidly. Some animals are colored for physical protection, such as having pigments in the skin to protect against sunburn, while some frogs can lighten or darken their skin for temperature regulation. Finally, animals can be colored incidentally. For example, blood is red because the HAEM pigment needed to carry oxygen is red. Animals colored in these ways can have striking natural patterns. Animals produce color in different ways. Pigments are particles of colored material. Chromatophores are cells containing pigment, which can change their size to make their color more or less visible. Some animals, including many butterflies and birds, have microscopic structures in scales, bristles or feathers which give them brilliant iridescent colors. Other animals including squid and some deep-sea fish can produce light, sometimes of different colors. Animals often use two or more of these mechanisms together to produce the colors and effects they need. History. Animal coloration has been a topic of interest and research in biology for centuries. In his 1665 book Micrographia, Robert Hooke describes the fantastical colors of the peacock's feathers. The parts of the feathers of this glorious bird appear, through the microscope, no less gaudy than do the whole feathers, for, as to the naked eye, 'tis evident that the stem or quill of each feather in the tail sends out multitudes of lateral branches. So each of those threads in the microscope appears a large long body, consisting of a multitude of bright reflecting parts. Their upper sides seem to me to consist of a multitude of thin plaited bodies, which are exceeding thin, and lie very close together, and thereby, like mother-of-pearl shells, do not only reflect a very brisk light, but tinge that light in a most curious manner, and by means of various positions, in respect of the light, they reflect back now one color, and then another, and those most vividly. Now, that these colors are only fantastical ones, that is, such as arise immediately from the refractions of the light, I found by this, that water wetting these colored parts, destroyed their colors, which seem to proceed from the alteration of the reflection and refraction. Robert Hooke, according to Charles Darwin's 1859 theory of natural selection, features such as coloration evolved by providing individual animals with a reproductive advantage. For example, individuals with slightly better camouflage than others of the same species would, on average, leave more offspring. In his Origin of Species, Darwin wrote, "When we see leaf-eating insects green, and bark feeders mottled gray, the alpine ptarmigan white in winter, the red grouse the color of heather, and the black grouse that of peaty earth, we must believe that these tints are of service to these birds and insects in preserving them from danger. Grouse, if not destroyed at some period of their lives, would increase in countless numbers. They are known to suffer largely from birds of prey, and hawks are guided by eyesight to their prey, so much so, that on parts of the continent persons are warned not to keep white pigeons, as being the most liable to destruction. Hence I can see no reason to doubt that natural selection might be most effective in giving the proper color to each kind of grouse, and in keeping that color, when once acquired, true and constant." Charles Darwin. Henry Walter Bates's 1863 book The Naturalist on the River Amazons describes his extensive studies of the insects in the Amazon basin, and especially the butterflies. He discovered that apparently similar butterflies often belong to different families, with a harmless species mimicking a poisonous or bitter-tasting species to reduce its chance of being attacked by a predator. In the process now called after him, Batesian mimicry. Edward Bagnall Poulton's strongly Darwinian 1890 book The Colors of Animals, Their Meaning and Use, especially considered in the case of insects, argued the case for three aspects of animal coloration that are broadly accepted today but were controversial or wholly new at the time. It strongly supported Darwin's theory of sexual selection, arguing that the obvious differences between male and female birds such as the Argus pheasant were selected by the females, pointing out that bright male plumage was found only in species which caught by day. The book introduced the concept of frequency-dependent selection, as when edible mimics are less frequent than the distasteful models whose colors and patterns they copy. In the book, Poulton also coined the term aposematism for warning coloration, which he identified in widely differing animal groups including mammals, bees and wasps, beetles, and butterflies. Frank Ebers Bedard's 1892 book, Animal Coloration, acknowledged that natural selection existed but examined its application to camouflage, mimicry and sexual selection very critically. The book was in turn roundly criticized by Poulton. Abbott Henderson Thayer's 1909 book Concealing Coloration in the Animal Kingdom, completed by his son Gerald H. Thayer, argued correctly for the widespread use of crypsis among animals, and in particular described and explained countershading for the first time. However, the Thayers spoilt their case by arguing that camouflage was the sole purpose of animal coloration, which led them to claim that even the brilliant pink plumage of the flamingo or the roseate spoonbill was cryptic, against the momentarily pink sky, at dawn or dusk. As a result, the book was mocked by critics including Theodore Roosevelt as having pushed the doctrine of concealing coloration to such a fantastic extreme, and to include such wild absurdities as to call for the application of common sense thereto. Hugh Bamford Cott's 500-page book Adaptive Coloration in Animals, published in wartime 1940, systematically described the principles of camouflage and mimicry. The book contains hundreds of examples, over 100 photographs and Cott's own accurate and artistic drawings, and 27 pages of references. Cott focused especially on maximum disruptive contrast, the kind of patterning used in military camouflage such as disruptive pattern material. Indeed, Cott describes such applications. The effect of a disruptive pattern is to break up what is really a continuous surface into what appears to be a number of discontinuous surfaces, which contradict the shape of the body on which they are superimposed. Hugh Cott, Evolutionary Reasons for Animal Coloration. Camouflage. One of the pioneers of research into animal coloration, Edward Bagnall Poulton classified the forms of protective coloration in a way which is still helpful. He described protective resemblance, aggressive resemblance, adventitious protection, and variable protective resemblance. These are covered in turn below. Protective resemblance is used by prey to avoid predation. It includes special protective resemblance, now called mimesis, where the whole animal looks like some other object. For example, when a caterpillar resembles a twig or a bird dropping. In general protective resemblance, now called crypsis, the animal's texture blends with the background. For example, when a moth's color and pattern blend in with tree bark. Aggressive resemblance is used by predators or parasites. In special aggressive resemblance, the animal looks like something else, luring the prey or host to approach. For example, when a flower mantis resembles a particular kind of flower, such as an orchid. In general aggressive resemblance, the predator or parasite blends in with the background. For example, when a leopard is hard to see in long grass. For adventitious protection, an animal uses materials such as twigs, sand, or pieces of shell to conceal its outline. For example, when a caddisfly larva builds a decorated case, or when a decorator crab decorates its back with seaweed, sponges and stones. Invariable protective resemblance. An animal such as a chameleon, flatfish, squid or octopus changes its skin pattern and color using special chromatophore cells to resemble whatever background it is currently resting on. The main mechanisms to create the resemblances described by Poulton, whether in nature or in military applications, are crypsis, blending into the background so as to become hard to see; disruptive patterning, using color and pattern to break up the animal's outline, which relates mainly to general resemblance; mimesis, resembling other objects of no special interest to the observer, which relates to special resemblance; countershading, using graded color to create the illusion of flatness, which relates mainly to general resemblance; and counter-illumination, producing light to match the background, notably in some species of squid. Countershading was first described by the American artist Abbott Henderson Thayer, a pioneer in the theory of animal coloration. Thayer observed that whereas a painter takes a flat canvas and uses colored paint to create the illusion of solidity by painting in shadows, animals such as deer are often darkest on their backs, becoming lighter towards the belly, creating the illusion of flatness, and against a matching background, of invisibility. Thayer's observation, animals are painted by nature darkest on those parts which tend to be most lighted by the sky's light, and vice versa, is called Thayer's law. Signaling color is widely used for signaling in animals as diverse as birds and shrimps. Signaling encompasses at least three purposes. Advertising, to signal a capability or service to other animals, whether within a species or not. Sexual selection, where members of one sex choose to mate with suitably colored members of the other sex, thus driving the development of such colors. Warning, to signal that an animal is harmful, for example, can sting, is poisonous or is bitter tasting. Warning signals may be mimicked truthfully or untruthfully. Advertising coloration signals an animal's capability to other animals. These may be of the same species, as in sexual selection, or of different species, as in cleaning symbiosis. Signals, which often combine color and movement, may be understood by many different species. For example, the cleaning stations of the banded coral shrimp Stenopus hispidus are visited by different species of fish, and even by reptiles such as hawksbill sea turtles. Sexual selection. Darwin observed that the males of some species, such as birds of paradise, were very different from the females. Darwin explained such male-female differences in his theory of sexual selection in his book The Descent of Man. Once the females begin to select males according to any particular characteristic, such as a long tail or a colored crest, that characteristic is emphasized more and more in the males. Eventually all the males will have the characteristics that the females are sexually selecting for, as only those males can reproduce. This mechanism is powerful enough to create features that are strongly disadvantageous to the males in other ways. For example, some male birds of paradise have wing or tail streamers that are so long that they impede flight, while their brilliant colors may make the males more vulnerable to predators. In the extreme, sexual selection may drive species to extinction, as has been argued for the enormous horns of the male Irish elk, which may have made it difficult for mature males to move and feed. Different forms of sexual selection are possible, including rivalry among males, and selection of females by males. Warning, coloration is effectively the opposite of camouflage. Its function is to make the animal, for example a wasp or a coral snake, highly conspicuous to potential predators, so that it is noticed, remembered, and then avoided. As Peter Forbes observes, human warning signs employ the same colors: red, yellow, black, and white, that nature uses to advertise dangerous creatures. Warning colors work by being associated by potential predators with something that makes the warning-colored animal unpleasant or dangerous. This can be achieved in several ways. Distasteful, for example caterpillars, pupae and adults of the cinnabar moth. The monarch butterfly and the variable checker-spot butterfly have bitter-tasting chemicals in their blood. One monarch contains more than enough digitalis-like toxin to kill a cat, while a monarch extract makes starlings vomit. Foul-smelling, for example the skunk can eject a liquid with a long-lasting and powerful odor. Poisonous, for example a wasp can deliver a painful sting, while snakes like the viper or coral snake can deliver a fatal bite. Warning coloration can succeed either through inborn behavior on the part of potential predators, or through a learned avoidance. Either can lead to various forms of mimicry. Experiments show that avoidance is learned in birds, mammals, lizards, and amphibians, but that some birds such as great tits have inborn avoidance of certain colors and patterns such as black and yellow stripes. Mimicry means that one species of animal resembles another species closely enough to deceive predators. To evolve, the mimic species must have warning coloration, because appearing to be bitter-tasting or dangerous gives natural selection something to work on. Once a species has a slight chance resemblance to a warning-colored species, natural selection can drive its colors and patterns towards more perfect mimicry. There are numerous possible mechanisms, of which by far the best known are Batesian mimicry, where an edible species resembles a distasteful or dangerous species. This is most common in insects such as butterflies. A familiar example is the resemblance of harmless hoverflies to bees. Mullerian mimicry, where two or more distasteful or dangerous animal species resemble each other. This is most common among insects such as wasps and bees. Batesian mimicry was first described by pioneering naturalist Henry W. Bates. When an edible prey animal comes to resemble, even slightly, a distasteful animal, natural selection favors those individuals that even very slightly better resemble the distasteful species. This is because even a small degree of protection reduces predation and increases the chance that an individual mimic will survive and reproduce. For example, many species of hoverfly are colored black and yellow like bees, and are in consequence avoided by birds. Mullerian mimicry was first described by pioneering naturalist Fritz Müller. When a distasteful animal comes to resemble a more common distasteful animal, natural selection favors individuals that even very slightly better resemble the target. For example, many species of stinging wasp and bee are similarly colored black and yellow. Müller's explanation of the mechanism for this was one of the first uses of mathematics in biology. He argued that a predator, such as a young bird, must attack at least one insect, say a wasp, to learn that the black and yellow colors mean a stinging insect. If bees were differently colored, the young bird would have to attack one of them also. But when bees and wasps resemble each other, the young bird need only attack one from the whole group to learn to avoid all of them. So, fewer bees are attacked if they mimic wasps. The same applies to wasps that mimic bees. The result is mutual resemblance for mutual protection. Distraction, startle, motion, dazzle. Some prey animals such as zebra are marked with high contrast patterns which possibly help to confuse their predators, such as lions, during a chase. The bold stripes of a herd of running zebra have been claimed make it difficult for predators to estimate the prey's speed and direction accurately, or to identify individual animals, giving the prey an improved chance of escape. Since dazzle patterns make animals harder to catch when moving, but easier to detect when stationary, there is an evolutionary trade-off between dazzle and camouflage. Another theory is that the zebra stripes could provide some protection from flies and biting insects. Physical protection. Many animals have dark pigments such as melanin in their skin, eyes and fur to protect themselves against sunburn. Temperature regulation. Some frogs such as Bocaminohyla alvarengai, which basks in sunlight, lighten their skin color when hot, making their skin reflect more heat and so avoid overheating. Incidental coloration. Some animals are colored purely incidentally because their blood contains pigments. For example, amphibians like the ome that live in caves may be largely colorless as color has no function in that environment. But they show some red because of the HAEM pigment in their red blood cells, needed to carry oxygen. They also have a little orange-colored riboflavin in their skin. Human albinos and people with fair skin have a similar color for the same reason.